In this course, we've covered creating date objects. We've covered creating array objects and regular expressions. And these are all built-in and predefined objects in JavaScript. And we've even talked about how to make our own simple objects, which we start off by just creating new variables that are wrapping several other variables together under one name. But we can go deeper with this idea. And for those of you who are interested in going deeper, particularly if you're coming from another object-oriented language, here's a quick introduction to the concept of a prototype in JavaScript. First, what can be a source of confusion is that there is a popular JavaScript library called Prototype, but that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about the Prototype built-in language feature of JavaScript, which will help us create more formalized objects. So what is the problem anyway? Well, a quick recap. We can create an object by using the curly braces or by using the words new object. And in this case, I'm using the curly braces and I'm loading it with some initial values. After this, I have this player Fred variable that I can use and I can add new properties freely to it. Properties are variables that belong to this particular object. And I can even add methods, which are functions that belong to this object. And then call the methods of that object. But there's nothing that would stop me, for example, creating another object which looks like it should have a similar structure, but in this case would have high score instead of score and have level instead of rank and just doesn't match the general structure. And this is what usually makes programmers coming from other object-oriented languages shudder, because they want to define multiple objects that share the same description. And we can do this here. We can formalize our own objects. Now, for those of you coming from those other languages, no, we don't get classes in JavaScript, but we can kind of fake it. So how do we do this? Well, step one, we create what's called a constructor function to make our new objects. That really means we create a function as normal with the name that we want to use to create multiple objects from, in this case, player, and by convention we use an uppercase first letter when defining this. The same way that date is an uppercase D, and array is an uppercase A, and regular expression has an uppercase R. And then step two is we create a new variable using the normal camel case idea, and importantly, we use the word new to create a new variable from that player constructor. Now, this will often seem a little odd the first time you see it. We've only seen the word new used before with built-in JavaScript objects like date and array and regular expression, but no, we can claim it ourselves. And this creates a new object and calls this constructor function for this new object. Now, there's nothing in this constructor function right now, so we might want to add a little data to the object. Well, I could put the phrase this.name equals Fred. If you remember, this is a word that we can use to refer to whatever the current object is. But I don't want to make all my objects have the name of Fred. So, well, here's where we use the benefit that this is a function. So what we can do instead is make this constructor function take a parameter. In this case, we'll call it n. And then when we call it, we'll actually create a new player passing in the name Fred. In this case, it'll call the function player and set the current object's name to Fred. So we now have an object with that property inside it. I could then call it again, creating another new player object, but in this case, I'm creating a new object called Bob with the Bob property set inside it. So this is how I start to formalize my objects a bit more than I could before. So if I switch over to a very simple piece of JavaScript where I'm doing exactly that, I have a constructor function here and I'm calling it once using the new keyword to create this as an object. In fact, if I want to give this object a bit more in the way of properties, I'm going to do it internally here. We're going to have a this.score equals S and a this.rank equals R. And I'll make this function accept 3 parameters. And hopefully this will make a kind of sense. We're really just calling it like a normal function, passing in 3 parameters. But the most important piece is what I'm going to do next, which is that every object in JavaScript has what's called a prototype property. And functions, like the player function I've just made, is an object in JavaScript, and I can use that prototype property. What I can do is call player.prototype dot, and then use this to attach, to tie new functions to this player object. So I might decide that I want this object to have a method called loginfo. And this is completely up to me what I call it. I'm going to set that equal to, and give it a function body here. And all I'll do with this one is make it write out a console.log. That writes out the message I am, then a comma, and then this.name. Again, using this to say whatever the name property of the current object is, because we might call this with 500 different objects, and I want to make sure it writes out the right one for each one. I could add another one in here, keeping the same general format. I'm going to say player.prototype. Well, let's give this one a promote method. And when promote is called, it's going to say this.rank plus plus. Add 1 to whatever the rank property of the current object is, and then we'll write out a message that says my new rank is this.rank. And using prototype, I am attaching these functions to that constructor, so it means they'll automatically be available on any object that was created using that new keyword. So down here, after I create this new variable called Fred, which is a new player, I can say Fred.loginfo, Fred.promote. Save that, jump over and open up the page that's using this script. If I have Firefox open, yep, I do. I can see in the console here, I am Fred, my new rank is 6. Now, it seems like an awful lot of trouble if I was just going to create one thing. But of course, the whole benefit of this is I can now create a new variable called Bob, which is a new player. And I'll pass in 3 pieces of information: the name, the score, and the rank. And I don't have to do anything else to make this object have the loginfo method. It will automatically have it. Same way it will have the promote method. I can just start calling those. Save that, jump over into the browser, refresh that, and we're getting the information about the different object. Create a third one, create a fourth one, create a fifth, and so on. Each of them will act independently of each other. They'll know about their own properties, and they'll base everything that they can do on both this constructor and any of these methods that I've attached using the .prototype property, without having to separately attach them for each and every object. Now, we are still in JavaScript, and it is a super flexible language, so I could still dynamically start adding extra methods and properties to each individual object, but I don't need to here. Now, as you might expect, you can take this idea of prototypes and of object orientation in JavaScript much deeper than this, but that's a subject for a completely different class. So for those of you looking for a somewhat more formalized object-oriented structure, this is certainly how you might begin.